Delighted, Moscow rewarded Cuba with subsidies of up to $6 billion per year.
The economy began to recover through about 1976, 1977. People had a real feeling of hope that the sacrifices of the 1960s were paying off economically.
We see no virtue in perpetual antagonism between the United States and Cuba. Our concern relates above all to Cuba's export of revolution.
On March 1st, 1975, U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger made a surprising announcement.
We have taken some symbolic steps to indicate that we are prepared to move in a new direction if Cuba will.
It was the era of U.S.-Soviet détente, and President Gerald Ford moved to normalize relations with Cuba and to end the 15-year-old U.S. economic embargo.
What would you like Americans to know about you and Cuba? And could you possibly say it in English so they could understand?
In English. I am not well in English.
Well, could then in Spanish?
Good wish for the people to the United States.
Good wishes.
Wish of understanding. Wish of friendship. I understand it is not easy because we belong to two different worlds. But we are vecinos, ¿cómo se dice?
Neighbors.
We are neighbors. And in one way or another, we ought to live in peace. United States and Cuba.
That fall, the State Department announced Cuba and the United States were ready to begin an official dialogue. But all along, Fidel Castro had had his eye on a situation developing half a world away, preparing Cuba for its first large-scale war. In West Africa, the Portuguese colony of Angola, about to become independent, was fast sliding into civil war. The Marxist Movement for the Liberation of Angola, the MPLA, asked Castro for military assistance to fight against its rivals, backed by South Africa. Fidel Castro faced a tough choice: intervention in Angola or rapprochement with the United States. On November 7th, 3 days before Independence Day, Cuban troops arrived in force. The U.S. government was caught by surprise.
The rapprochement or normalization with the United States was derailed. He placed a higher priority on his internationalist revolutionary objectives than on better relations with the United States.
¿Qué clase de condiciones pretende el imperialismo establecer a nuestro país? Ejercemos nuestra solidaridad con Angola, estamos ayudando a Angola y seguiremos ayudando al pueblo de Angola.
By January 1976, there were 15,000 Cuban troops in Angola. Armed and supplied by the Soviet Union, they pushed back the army of South Africa and secured the MPLA in power.
The Cuban intervention in Angola identifies Cuba as a country that's willing to take a risk, willing to put its own interests on the line, willing to provoke a confrontation with the United States in support of national liberation in Africa. It boosts Cuba's prestige in the Third World enormously.
Castro assumed the role of leader of a major power. His doctors and teachers were serving as far away as Yemen. His troops were fighting in Angola and Ethiopia, in close alliance with the Soviet Union. Soon he would play a key role in another war. The Sandinista insurrection against Anastasio Somoza in Nicaragua.
The Sandinista victory in Nicaragua was directed by Fidel Castro from the headquarters of Cuba's Special Forces. They had broken the codes of the Somoza army, and Fidel knew all their movements and told the Sandinistas where to lay ambushes, what to do until they took power. That was a war directed by Fidel Castro.
It was Castro's first victory in the Western Hemisphere, one he'd been waiting for since 1959.
Los revolucionarios no podemos ser pesimistas. Los revolucionarios somos y seremos siempre optimistas. Tampoco nos dejaremos intimidar. Nuestros pueblos han demostrado a la larga de la historia su capacidad de lucha.
Él se ve en ese momento como la punta de lanza.
He sees himself as the spearhead of a great socialist revolution,
Que en el plazo de 10 años todo el Caribe
and believes that in 10 years
un mundo
all the Caribbean is going to be dominated by Cuba,
Cuba,
and he is going to play the
él
key
iba a
role,
ser la
be
figura
the other
clave,
great power,
la otra gran
and he
fuerza.
sees himself as a figure of that
Se ve
stature.
así, como una figura de ese tamaño y de esa naturaleza.
In September 1979, Fidel Castro was elected leader of the Movement of Non-Aligned Nations. 1 month later,